Welcome to another amazing episode of TalkingSense. I'm having so much fun this season getting back to my roots and talking all about sales. Today, I'm really honored and excited to have Karen Snow from Nasdaq on the show. And she's going to tell us all these things, what it takes to be a publicly traded CRO. So Karen, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So let's get into it. You get to see so many companies in your role. And maybe just for the listeners, because you have kind of a unique role, maybe just describe like what it is you do.
Yeah, so I am the head of U.S. listings and revenue at Nasdaq. So that really entails all the new listings new listings work that we do with private companies, as well as the work that we do with companies once they go public. So we have IR solutions, ESG solutions, as well as governance solutions. We execute on companies' visibility packages that they get as part of their IPO. So it really entails, activating our services and support for companies throughout their life cycle as a listed company at Nasdaq.
So, given the timing, should we all just give up on the IPO?
No, never. No, in fact, what I would say is...
Give us some encouragement.
Yes,
Karen.
Yes, I know. Listen, what I would say is that time is a luxury, right? We're in an environment right now where it gives people more time to get ready. And from a CRO perspective, you really want to be laying the groundwork, doing all the things that you need to do to be public company ready. And when I think about sort of, the CRO role, it's really to drive predictable growth, especially if you're a public company. So really aligning and connecting all the different revenue related functions from marketing to sales, customer success, pricing, revenue ops. And when I think about sort of the pre-IPO, you want to develop the company's revenue model. You want to have, created a management team structure that's going to work for you for the long term. You want to be testing out your go-to-market strategies, aligning your marketing, messaging, working on your budgeting. And I would say, the last thing is really ensuring that your sales team have the proper systems in place to succeed, right? Because once you go public, the stakes are a lot higher. Your ability to kind of test things out becomes a little bit more challenged just because the stakes are higher. And you've got to really manage expectations and, set attainable targets.
So really, I love what you said about time being the luxury, because I think there were a lot of companies that were racing to go out. And maybe when the covers get pulled back, or when you really look, they still were testing things out. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of room to be testing, is what I'm hearing.
Well, you don't want to be fixing the plane while you're flying it necessarily, right? So, look, and I would say across the board, this doesn't apply to the CRO role as much, but more the CFO role. You want to, before going public, you want to go through a process of reporting your numbers all internally, right? Doing earnings reports, making sure that everyone understands how the reporting structure is going to work, what the roles and responsibilities are going to be. And as it relates to the CRO, it's really helping manage those predictable revenues.
Which now is hard.
It's definitely harder. Yes.
Right? I mean, I think Mark Benioff said he's not going to do a forecast.
Yeah. No, it's definitely gotten more challenging, right? And I think, if you're an investor or you're an analyst, people don't want to be wrong. So if they feel like they can't trust your ability to forecast and deliver on your numbers, they're not going to invest in you. So it's really critical. And I think that's one of the amazing things about the CRO role now. It's really increased the visibility of revenues. And it's put a lot more pressure and visibility on those who are driving revenue.
Yeah. And that ability to forecast, right? So, and it's either way, right? I mean, big swing, obviously a big swing for the positive. People aren't going to they're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth too much, but it's also like so much relies on the forecast. So, the ability to really nail it consistently, month in and month out becomes so much more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your business, Karen, because it's interesting. It probably has, every business has seasonality or, different dynamics to it. So maybe talk about what's going on with your business and sort of the peaks and flows and things like that.
Yeah. So I would say we have different components, right? So I've got the IPO market, and new listings under me, as well as our SaaS-based solution and our advisory services. So lots of different cadences and sales cycles, different types of selling in those channels. Commonality, though, is consultative. We do a lot of sort of advising in our selling process. But ultimately, we also want to make sure that, we are achieving our results for each different channel. When it comes to IPOs, though, I would say, you control the controllables. If people aren't coming to market, it's really about delivering for them while they're private and developing the relationships and doing the right things to help partner with companies to help drive their results and prepare them for the public market. So there's plenty to do around that, I would say. And, to your point earlier, when you're in a high growth kind of hot market environment, the mentality seems to be, grow at all costs. When you're in a colder environment, it gets a little tougher to manage things. You've got to really have tight reins around your forecasts and predictability. And investors are really looking to you to deliver consistency and on your word, right? And to really show a path to profitability.
How do you keep your team motivated? I mean, it's a tough time, right? Yeah. And yes, that I mean, we've been working with Nasdaq. You guys have been great, helping coach us, helping, especially on the marketing side, giving us access and like kind of a taste of the power of Nasdaq behind your brand, which has been awesome. But most salespeople are attainment driven. So how do you keep spirits high on the team?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we have an amazing culture, and people who have been here a very long time, who have lived through cycles. So they have a perspective that's important to share with people who may not have lived through a cycle. I would say a few of the other things that I think are key and important. We have a culture that enables control and choice, right? So I really view my role is to remove friction make sure people are trained, make sure they have the right tools in place, and they understand the rules of the road in terms of collaborating with different groups within the organization to drive results. But beyond that, I want them to have the ability to focus their time and energy in a way that can really drive their own personal results. Our compensation plans are structured in a way that it's highly motivating for them. So I think that's another really important piece. We definitely make sure people are challenged here and have the opportunity on the upside. So, we are always looking to continue to grow and develop our people. And I think that's exciting for people to feel like they're stretching and, they're very much involved in the outcome and Nasdaq's overall outcome. And then collaboration, I would say, is huge at Nasdaq and working across teams to deliver results. And then, lastly, when we talked about culture, I think that's also, gives you sort of purpose and meaning as well. So you're tied to something larger. And then I would say the last thing is sort of the consequences, right? So, we really try to highlight people who are doing well, and we have a winning culture. And I think that also on the reverse side of it, people who aren't able to succeed in this kind of environment get weeded out. They weed themselves out, before we really have to tap them a lot of times.
Yeah, self-selection based on just they look around and see they're not, probably gonna make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how the sales environment has changed, because a lot of things have stayed the same. And I love a lot of the things you said about culture, because you could go back 10 years ago and that similar 5 years ago, but here we are today. A lot of similarities, but a lot of differences too. Like, what have you seen and what do you think is different today versus maybe in the past?
Yeah, well, I would say information flow, right? It's, I came to Nasdaq about 4 years ago, but I've worked on Wall Street for, 25 years. And I worked in investment banking and I worked in equity sales. And the equity sales job is kind of gone away because of information flow. So just watching how that transformation has happened over the years has been incredible. I think as it relates to our business today, buyers are much more informed than they used to be. So when you think about bringing sales into the conversation, they really need to be additive. Because people find a lot of information on your website, your digital content is being used a lot more to nurture prospects. We're doing a lot of kind of comparison and peer review, and there's different solutions for that. And of course, you've got your ABM platforms like Sixth Sense, and there really is a lot more out there. And I would say leveraging that technology in a way that can help drive your revenues in a predictable way. I do feel like CROs have a lot more control over the process than they used to, right? Because of all the different sources of information, data that's out there, and then the ability to really activate all your different channels to support your sales.
It's interesting because in some ways, it could feel like you have less control since they're doing all this research. But by the same token, if you're gathering that information and using it, then you really have that same level, if not more control, to your point, because you have this visibility that a lot of times before you didn't. It's not that people weren't still doing research and talking to people. They were.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like we called it a back channel reference, right? It was
Right.
still happening.
Right.
But at least now there are tools and information in place to like bring that to bear. How do you see?
I would say, on the sales front, at least at Nasdaq anyway, almost everything that we're selling here is based on a relationship and trust. But that's the foundation. And so I think all of these tools are really meant to support our team in a way that makes them successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see a tighter relationship with marketing then?
Yes.
Since more of the journey
much more so. And
how do you kind of facilitate that?
So we have our marketing team involved in all of our strategic conversations, right? And really mapped out by each product and service. And they understand the sales cycle, the cadence. And we have our sales team structured in a way where they're cross-selling across our entire suite of products and services. And we need to make sure that we're leaning in at the right moments throughout the year when those different personas would be thinking about purchasing. So it's very sophisticated, I would say, and requires a lot of coordination.
And how do you align with your kind of broader marketing team personally? Like, what are your touch points? How do you, just stay in the flow? And
I mean, we have weekly meetings, basically. So everyone's on the same page of exactly what's happening, what things we need to be amplifying, when we need to be doing it, what the focus is for the next, 2 months, what the focus is for this week. So we're like continuously managing that and all the different work streams.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say linked, arm in arm.
So once a company is public, does it take a different kind of CRO? Like, how does the job change?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's a different CRO. I think, regardless of when you are going public or not. Well, let me take a step back. I think it does require a different level of sophistication. But what I would say is, I would think anyone who's preparing to go public would be hiring that type of a person, right? So that type of person would be sitting in the role for 2 years before going public, right? Things get amped up, as I mentioned, in terms of visibility and that predictability component. So you want to really iron those things out before going public. But generally speaking, I'd say you have to have very strong leadership skills. You want to build an incredible team. You want to make sure that they're motivated and everyone is swimming in the same direction. A good CRO should be very visionary and data driven, which we've talked a little bit about. Very dynamic, cool under pressure, and I would say nimble around change and able to pivot quickly, and really able to dial things down when they need to be in terms of expectations and meeting those expectations. And they need to be able to ultimately instill trust within the C-suite, the boardroom, and with investors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I guess dialing down would be also the equivalent of bad news, right? To be able to, what's the right way to do that?
Well, I think it's setting expectations in a way that is very clear. And you need to be thinking about the integrity of your business, right? Your own reputation and your firm's reputation, and what's at stake by not being realistic about the situation.
Mm-hmm. So you really need a lot of, we talk a lot about confidence. We have a campaign right now, Proceed with Confidence. And what I'm hearing is, if you're going to stand up and say something, you had better be really confident, like to your core, you know? And so like step one is make sure you have that confidence.
I think you have to be very centered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's hard, especially in a volatile climate right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say again, having lived through cycles is important, or understanding them, right? And controlling the controllables.
Yes, controlling the controllables. And not getting too
flustered.
Emotional, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think that's where sort of the data-driven component comes in, right? And making sure that you're leveraging all the tools at your disposal, that you're, choosing the right KPIs, delivering to those, keeping people super efficient, focused on the right things. Right.
Well, one of the questions that you can't leave the show without answering is your biggest mistakes. You learn more from your mistakes, I believe. And so we ask everybody to reflect back and share a mistake and a learning.
Yeah, so I would say probably a bigger mistake just from a career perspective is thinking that, coming to work and doing a great job is enough. I think, being really aware of all the different components and thinking ahead to, strategically about, how you're aligning yourself relationship-wise, who your mentors are, is probably one of the bigger things that is important in a large organization, right? And when you think about it from a CRO seat, you're wanting to get to that seat, you really have to think about connecting all of those dots and those relationships and building collaboration amongst all of those teams. So I think, thinking back on my career in terms of like my own growth and acceleration, I wish I had understood that a little bit earlier in my career.
When do you think the light went off?
I think coming to a place like Nasdaq, right? I just had in my old seat, I wasn't really exposed. I wasn't really exposed to a lot of different channels and sales and products and all of that. I was, just in a different type of a seat. But it really, I would say, I was in more of a sales seat versus a revenue seat. And it kind of connected more for me when I came to Nasdaq, including, being closer to the C-suite and understanding how we manage our own numbers, right? And having an appreciation for that, working with IRs and C-suites and boards now, around all of these issues. So, and I think people don't always necessarily appreciate all that goes into connecting all of these dots.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is kind of fascinating because Mary Shea said the exact same thing.
Interesting.
As her response.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it has anything to do with being female or not. I've never heard a gentleman say that, but I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
she talked about like thinking that she could show up and just do great work.
Yeah.
And everyone
it could.
notice.
I do think there's a piece of that. I think women tend to focus on competency and feel like they need to be 150%, 200% competent before kind of pushing themselves forward. Where I think men probably feel less of that and more that it's important to spend time on the relationships, building the relationships. And I think probably she and I are of the same generation, right? Where women were really beginning to expand in the workforce. And I think we have a lot more, hopefully mentors in the workforce now for younger women. And that's actually why I bring up the point, because I think you can waste a lot of time just doing good work when you really actually need to make sure that you're connecting all those dots in an organization and building relationships internally to really sort of ignite your career in a way that, when you start to get towards the top, you've got to have a lot of people buying in to you and your role. And no matter what C-suite title you have, you're connecting dots, collaborating with people, and that, builds the culture of the organization. And it's really important that, everybody get along and support each other. And, because of that, it's, really about the relationships.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I learned a saying at my last job, because I think so often when you're a leader, you think, oh, my team and my function, and, these are the KPIs I'm driving, and this is what I'm doing. And I want to motivate my team, and I want them to do great. And I'm going to bring my leaders together, and you're doing all those things. And my CEO sat us all down and he said, your team, this is your team.
Exactly.
You happen to have people that report to you.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, like, exactly where we were. We were in a conference room in Boulder, and it was that lightning strikes,
Mm-hmm.
and that really changed so much for me. And yeah, I have to spend time with aligning with them. And just because my team is mobilized and doing great things doesn't mean it's trickling across. And so it was just a big eye opener for me. It's funny how sometimes you have those moments where you're like, I see it so clearly now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's important, just to recognize, also what you really bring to the table and have the confidence in yourself, and to not be shy about, making sure that it's understood what you are bringing to the table. But I think it's important to do it in a way that, people want to partner with you, right? And be on the winning team.
So how do you do that without alienating people?
I think you need to highlight the good work that comes out of collaborating, and highlight it across teams, and celebrate it, right? And I do think that going back to compensation, I think it's important that teams be compensated across the organization in a way that encourages that collaboration and partnership.
So making sure everyone wins together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I try to actually have my sales team when we have a win, highlighting all the people that contributed to the win. Right. So important. And that it doesn't have to come from the top. It's coming from the people who are leading the sale and who recognize all the contributions, throughout the organization. And I think that's one of the best ways, honestly. And then for management to come over the top and congratulate everyone.
Yeah. I mean, you don't win a deal alone. You don't lose a deal alone, right? It's always a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so the recognition of that, one of the things I've tried to do, we're a very Slack culture, as everyone is now, is just I think that sometimes you get in positive habits of giving recognition, just like you can get in negative habits of people just off doing their thing and not knowing about it. So I've tried to really have a concerted effort around shout outs and actually giving shout outs to people who give shout outs,
yeah.
Which I know is kind of like, but I'm like, look, this person is taking the time
100%
to recognize. And that's important. That's like a important fabric of our culture. So, it's interesting too, and how we have to do that differently now, that not everyone is together all the time.
Yeah.
So, and
I think that means as much as their commission checks sometimes, it's the recognition not only of, management, but peers.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I whenever we'd have to do those, like you give the pitch and you have to give it in front of your peers to like get certified. That was way more nerve-wracking than going out and trying it with a client.
Right.
It's like, I don't want to look bad in front of my peers,
Totally. We were just planning our sales kickoff event, and we actually decided not to do that in the end because, people are standing up now in front of thousands of people. And we felt like it might be a little bit too much this year without giving people enough warning. So
too nerve-wracking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Record yourself and send it in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We can handle that.
It's the Shark Tank effect.
Yes. Awesome. Well, Karen, I appreciate the honesty. It was really amazing for you to share that and come on and talk about what it takes to be a publicly traded CRO and, the 2 years it takes to get there. And, how you're keeping your team motivated and how you guys are operating at Nasdaq. You just learned so much myself and loved having you on the show.
Good. Well, thank you so much. We love Sixth Sense and appreciate the time and to be able to speak with you today.